final item of business today is the members' business debate on motion number 3421 in the name of Linda Fabiani on October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. This debate will be concluded without any question being put, and I'd be grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible. And I call on Linda Fabiani to open the debate. 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. It's very nice, after the very rambunctious debate that we've just had, to be able to stand up and know that we're going to speak about something about which there is actually consensus right across the chamber. I want to first of all thank everyone who signed up to the motion and who are here to take part in this debate, because October is, of course, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I think we have to acknowledge the role that having a Breast Cancer Awareness Month plays in promoting the early detection and, of course, the work of all the cancer charities in raising that awareness. I want to particularly thank Breakthrough Breast Cancer for the help they've given me with this debate, and, of course, for its very, very memorable breast awareness message, Touch, Look, Check, which promotes knowledge of the signs and symptoms of breast cancer and the importance of regular checking. Now, I know that there's many people who want to speak this evening, so I'll just start by outlining a few facts about breast cancer in Scotland. It is the most common cancer among Scottish women, and nearly 4,500 women are diagnosed every year in Scotland. There are, in fact, 460 of those women in NHS Lanarkshire, the health authority which covers the area within which I live and work. Around 1,000 Scottish women die annually from the disease. And Scottish women have a 1 in 9 chance of developing breast cancer in their lifetime. Now, I know that others here this evening will develop these particular themes, so I would like to concentrate on a few bits. I want to first raise concern about breast awareness and the lower socio-economic groups. Women in lower socio-economic groups have poorer levels of breast cancer awareness compared to women in affluent groups. And the 2011 survey that was carried out said that 79% of women in groups D and E had knowledge of or any sign of signs or symptoms of breast cancer, compared to 93% of women in higher socio-economic groups. And only 47% of these women checked their breasts once a month or more, compared to 60% in women in social economic groups A-B. Now, that's a really, really important thing, because whilst breast cancer incidence is higher in affluent groups, women in more deprived groups have poorer outcomes and survival rates. Sometimes it's down to being diagnosed at a later stage, and sometimes it's because there's perhaps an increased likelihood of other health problems. So it makes it very, very important to improve levels of breast awareness. And I know that Breakthrough Breast Cancer would very much like to see more focus on increasing breast awareness amongst those groups, combined with better public health messaging, so that people can improve their general health and increase the chances of a better outcome. Another issue is older women. Over 80% of breast cancers occur in women over 50. I know that there is a pilot going on in England just now on age extension from 47 to 63, as opposed to what we have just now in this country. And I think, too, because age is the biggest risk factor for breast cancer, it makes it very, very important that older women are and remain breast aware. So I think, like Breakthrough Breast Cancer, I'd like to see the NHS in Scotland doing more to focus on encouraging and educating breast awareness within this age group. And that brings me on to prevention, of course. 80% of breast cancers are not inherited. Now, that was a figure that surprised me very much, because whilst the other figures I had heard before, when I looked at this one, I realised that I suffered from what I believe to be a common misconception, that you are much more at risk if there is breast cancer in your family. But it turns out that 80% of breast cancers are not inherited. I think there's an awareness raising about that figure which should be carried out. And that is then leading on to the breast awareness campaign. Researchers have estimated that around 40% of all breast cancer cases could be prevented if women maintained a healthy weight, limited their alcohol intake and increased their level of physical activity. I'm not going to say anything about anybody in here except me. I'm not going to make comment on my alcohol intake, but I certainly could increase my level of physical activity, and I don't think my weight is particularly healthy. So I think, again, that is a big issue. So if we have this awareness that 80% of breast cancers are not inherited and that 40% could be prevented, I think that would be a very, very worthwhile campaign to be pushing. And when you look at that being equivalent to around 1,800 odd fewer cases of the disease being diagnosed in Scotland each year, we really, really could make a big difference to changing behaviours around the risk factors that are modifiable. That brings me on to diagnosis, and I'm aware that time's short. I'm so glad other people will expand on these themes. There is a view, an issue, that perhaps there are some health professionals that are not well enough up on breast awareness. It's anecdotal, but we are told that some GPs are actually less breast aware than the women who present to them. So there is a case for GPs receiving better education around the signs and symptoms of breast cancer. Whether that is part of their medical training or part of engagement in a sort of continuing professional development capacity with the initiatives around Detect Cancer Early. I know that there are many GPs, many practitioners who are very involved with the charities that deal with breast cancer issues. So it's not to put anyone down, but it's just to make it known that this is also so very important. There's an issue about screening just now. There are those who think it's perhaps not the best way to be checking for breast cancers. But what I would urge here is that we should not be allowing that debate to put women off going for screening. It is so very, very important. And in between screening, we should be making sure that women remain breast aware. And that's why, Presiding Officer, I'll close with saying that I want to welcome the Breakthrough Breast Cancer initiative that has just come out, because what they have done, they've produced a guide containing the award-winning Touch, Look, Check breast awareness message. It's available by texting SIGNS signs to the number 84424. And I should say at this point that text users will only be charged their standard network rate and no premium number charges apply. So I think that's a very, very useful initiative. And in asking the Minister to respond to some of the points I've made and others made, I would ask him most of all to make sure that we maintain the Detect Cancer Early campaign, because I think it's been a big success, a great initiative, and we would like to see it continued. Thank you.
There's a number of members who wish to speak, so I'd be grateful for speeches of 4 minutes or less. Jackie Bailey, to be followed by Aileen MacLeod.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I congratulate Linda Fabiani on securing this debate? I know she and I are both in purple today. We should have perhaps coordinated and been in pink instead. But can I congratulate the many organisations, volunteers and supporters who have attended Parliament this week and last week. We've been privileged to celebrate the work of Breakthrough Breast Cancer and Walk the Walk, who organise Edinburgh's Moonwalk, where pink bras invade the city. And I am struck that Linda Fabiani perhaps might want to join Sarah Boyack, Drew Smith, myself, or even perhaps the Minister and the Cabinet Secretary on next year's Moonwalk, and Malcolm Chisholm. Dear me, I almost forgot Malcolm Chisholm. I think it would be a great signal for MSPs to actually walk the walk. And many of us, both male and female, have donned our pink feather boas, our hats, and our other more interesting items, some frankly indescribable, but all pink, in support of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. But the stories we heard were moving and dignified, from the initial shock of diagnosis to the challenges of treatment, to the very positive stories of survival. And we need to constantly remind ourselves of why this matters. Because, yes, Scotland's cancer record is continuing to improve. And the fact that the survival rates of many cancers are increasing is a point to be celebrated. But we should attribute part of that success to the early diagnosis and the increase in early diagnosis, to health education programmes aimed at encouraging earlier presentation and referral, and the raised awareness due to projects like the Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We know that the earlier a cancer is recognised, the greater the chance it has of being cured. And this is the reason why organisations like Breakthrough Breast Cancer do play such a key role, by sending out the message, a very simple message of TLC, touch, look and check. They are actually helping women themselves to identify problems earlier and helping ultimately to save lives across the country. Cancer, though, is still a major issue that affects many of us, in Scotland particularly. Breast cancer is a particular problem. It's the most common cancer among Scottish women. Nearly 4,500 women are diagnosed each year. Around 1,000 Scottish women die annually from the disease. And I hope that we can do even more to ensure that more survive in the future. It is vital we make every effort to reduce that number, and early detection programmes are simply the best way to do this. Now, I think education is key. Statistics from Breakthrough Breast Cancer I found particularly appalling, because they show that only 3% of women know there are 5 or more different signs and symptoms of breast cancer. And even more appalling, 62% of women don't check regularly. It is an easy thing to do. Scotland's one-year survival rates are lower than other European countries, particularly Nordic countries, and this is largely due to late presentation, because we don't check and we don't respond early enough. Breast screening programmes are, in my view, clearly essential. Linda referred to the debate about overdiagnosis and overtreatment, but this should be set clearly in the context of an impressive number of women diagnosed and treated successfully. So breast screening programmes do need to stay. We had an earlier debate, quite an angry one at points, but it was a debate about universal programmes versus targeting. But actually we need to do both. We have a fine example of a universal screening programme. But the one thing I would like to say in closing, presiding officer, is we need to target disadvantaged areas more, because in deprived areas the risk of breast cancer is greater. Women from deprived areas are less likely to be diagnosed early and have a less hopeful survival rate than those in the most affluent areas. We therefore must do more to ensure that those living in disadvantaged communities are reached too. Finally, can I commend the Scottish Government for the advertising campaign that they're currently engaged in? I think it's fantastic. There is controversy about showing breasts on TV and, dare I say it, even in newspapers. But as Audrey Burt of Breakthrough Breast Cancer said, get over it. And if it helps save lives, presiding officer, then indeed people should get over it and support the campaign.
Thank you. Aileen McLeod, to be followed by Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And may I also add my own congratulations to Linda Fabiani for securing this debate on an issue which many of us in the Chamber will have had personal experience with, be it ourselves, family members, neighbours or friends. And let me start by paying tribute to not only the women and men who are diagnosed with breast cancer, but also the doctors, nurses, carers, families and friends who support them through often very traumatic experiences. And this evening's debate is all the more poignant for me personally, because as some of you will know, that my own mum is currently undergoing treatment for breast cancer at Cross House Hospital in Irvine. And I thank members across the Chamber for their kind words of support over the past few months, and offer my own encouragement to those here today who are also affected. And she's doing fantastically well, and I'm certainly very proud of her strength, courage and determination to win her battle against cancer, as I did mine more than 20 years ago when I was 19. And indeed, had it not been for my mum's support, nor that of the many doctors and nurses who got me through it at the Beatson Cancer Centre in Glasgow, I know I would not be here today. Presiding Officer, I'm sure many of us are aware of the debate surrounding the Scottish Government's current Detect Cancer Early scheme, and the advert featuring Elaine C. Smith has made headlines across the whole of the UK and not just Scotland. And to be honest, this is great news, the very fact that people are aware of the campaign. And if just a handful more women check for the symptoms detailed in the advert and appreciate that lumps aren't the only signs of breast cancer, it will have been worth it. I appreciate that we can stand here and welcome £30 million of funding for such programmes, but I believe that ensuring protection for our nation's healthcare is more important than putting a monetary value on our NHS. Getting the right sort of educational message out to people from a young age on how to check themselves and spot signs of breast cancer is vital to successful treatment. And I believe that the Scottish Government is doing the right things to ensuring waiting times for cancer patients are down, as well as highlighting how to detect cancer. But we know there is still more to do. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we heard that between April and June this year, 95.3% of patients with suspected cancer started treatment within the target time of 62 days. Now, when asking cancer care nurses what they thought was the most effective form of detection, they did not hesitate when saying that breast screening programmes have been invaluable. And last month's injection of £12 million and upgrading breast screening equipment to digital will therefore be very welcomed by the health professionals dealing on a daily basis with cancer patients. But it's not just the governments and NHS staff who contribute to cancer care. And as Jackie Bailey said this evening, many of us here will have dressed in their finest pink garments and donned some very interesting accessories for the Breast Cancer Campaign's annual Wear It Pink Day. And many of us have also hosted our Macmillan Cancer Big Coffee Mornings, and I was delighted to have one in the office that I shared with my colleague Joan McAlpine in Dumfries last week. Now, Cancer Research is a charity we are all familiar with, and we are here today because of my colleague Linda Fabiani's motion highlighting Breakthrough Breast Cancer's Touch, Look, Check campaign. But there are also many other smaller local cancer support networks across Scotland, many which become a lifeline for cancer patients when they're undergoing treatment and during the recovery period, of which I know only too well myself. And I'd like to publicly recognise these organisations also today and to thank them for all their efforts on behalf of all constituents they're able to support. Presiding Officer, this evening we're offering words of gratitude, support and encouragement for breast cancer patients and those assisting them. But that is not all we are doing. I'd like to think that we are committing ourselves as parliamentarians to ensuring that our NHS remains able to support all cancer patients, an NHS that is free at the point of need and remains the mainstay of our public services, providing the best possible care and service. And I wish all breast cancer campaigns the very best of success in their efforts to raise awareness, and have no doubt that all sides of the chamber this evening give their full backing to these campaigns.
Patricia Ferguson, to be followed by Dennis Robertson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I too thank Linda Fabiani for bringing forward this timely debate this evening. The motion tabled for debate emphasises the importance of early detection in all cases of cancer and recognises that the Scottish Government's Detect Cancer Early initiative will firstly target breast cancer. And can I too add my comments to those of Aileen Whiteford in praising the staff who work with those who have a diagnosis of cancer and who do such great work, not just at the time of diagnosis, but through treatment and often beyond. And we know the statistics around breast cancer, that some 4,500 women and some men are diagnosed every year in Scotland, and that 1,000 people will die annually from the disease. Indeed, Linda Fabiani's motion indicates that 460 women in the NHS Lanarkshire area were diagnosed with the condition in 2010. Like many colleagues, I'm sure, when I read the motion, I immediately checked to see how many women in my area of Greater Glasgow and Clyde were diagnosed. Now, statistics like that are a valuable tool. They help to inform us as legislators, and they allow services to be shaped. But every one of those statistics is a person who has been given a diagnosis they feared and now knows that they are likely to face months of treatment. Now, I have an admission to make. When I looked at those figures, helpfully provided by Breakthrough Breast Cancer, My first thought wasn't to look at the latest figures, but it was instead to look to see how many women in Greater Glasgow shared my experience of being diagnosed with breast cancer. Can't remember how long ago it was now, but it was in 2008, so that's 4 years, isn't it? Seems such a long time ago. Actually, it was 940 women. And I have to say that I personally was exceptionally lucky because my cancer only affects 1% of those diagnosed. And while it did require surgery and reconstruction, I didn't have to have chemotherapy or radiotherapy, and I was able to be back at work less than 2 months after surgery. Not sure that was actually a benefit, but there we go. But my reason for mentioning my own case today is simply to reinforce the message that screening is important, but that being aware of changes in your breasts is essential, no matter what age you are. Now, members might find this hard to believe, but when I was diagnosed, I was too young just to have been called for screening. But I noticed a change. It wasn't a lump. I'll spare the chamber the details, but let's just say that in my case, size really did matter. This is why I think the Scottish Government's current adverts reminding women of the need to be aware of any change are so important, and why the TLC campaign is vital. I decided to mention my experience today because I'm very worried about the number of women in constituencies like mine who don't attend for screening. As with so many other health issues, it is women from poorer areas who are least likely to attend for screening and more likely to need more radical surgery and treatment when eventually they are diagnosed. So I would ask the Minister to consider targeting those communities to encourage more women to come forward. Because if we go back to the statistics again, only around 70% of women in Glasgow take up the opportunity to have screening. I suspect too that what the statistics can't tell us is the number of women who continue to soldier on when they know they have a problem, either because they're afraid of what it might mean or because they are worried about who will look after their children if they have to go into hospital, or whether their employer will be sympathetic when they need time off. So my message is quite clear. If you're called for screening, if you spot something that's just a little bit different from normal, go to your GP as soon as you can. Follow the TLC campaign and encourage your daughter, your friends and anyone you know to do so too. In most cases, you won't have cancer, and if you do, the earlier it's caught, the simpler the treatment is likely to be, and the greater your chances of making a full recovery.
Thank you. And I call Dennis Robertson to be followed by Siobhan McMahon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was very privileged a few weeks ago to attend the Breakthrough Cancer workshop. And it was at that workshop, led by Ashley Donaldson, a champion for Breakthrough Cancer, that I realised the importance of TLC. And I think TLC is something that we can all sort of accept, and something we can look towards, because it means so many different things to many people. I want to applaud the courage and bravery of those that have shared their personal experiences in this chamber this evening. And Patricia Ferguson is absolutely right. Statistics are people. And people, when they're diagnosed, it's a shock. And there's fear and there's anxiety. And Breakthrough Cancer, I think, in the early stages, by encouraging TLC to the youngest, those perhaps that maybe don't think that they will be affected by breast cancer and are certainly out with the age range for screening. But if we can get young people to check on a regular basis, to do the TLC in their teens, it then doesn't become a problem for them when they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, etc., because it's natural. Breakthrough Cancer encourages a routine, and I think a routine is the way forward. Perhaps it's when you go to your shower. Perhaps it's when you get ready for bed. We're not asking everyday checks, but we're asking get into a routine and be aware of the changes that may happen. Be aware what happens to your own body. Be aware of your body. Presiding Officer, Very few men suffer from breast cancer. In fact, the numbers in Scotland is about 0.6%. And the symptoms for men aren't so different. There could be a hardening around the breast area. There could be changes around the nipple. But quite often it's painless. And most men would probably just disregard it. And I think Scottish men in particular probably would, because they're not particularly good at actually going to their doctors anyway with any condition. So perhaps we need to get over those barriers. We need to encourage people to be aware of their body and changes in their body. I support the work that Breakthrough Cancer does, and I would encourage those who can to become champions for Breakthrough Cancer throughout Scotland to take forward that initiative, to help and encourage those to become more aware, because becoming aware saves lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I call Ms McMahon, can I just let the Chamber know that we have a large number of members who still wish to speak in the debate, so I'm minded to accept a motion under Rule 8.14.3 that the debate be extended by up to 30 minutes, and I would be grateful if Linda Fabiani would care to move that.
Formally moved.
Thank you very much. Is that agreed? Thank you. I now call Siobhan McMahon to be followed by Nanette Milne.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to be able to take part in this evening's debate, and I thank Linda Fabiani for bringing forward her motion to the Chamber. She's given us the opportunity not only to discuss our own experiences of breast cancer and to highlight the challenges that continue to face, but also to thank the many people who work for breast cancer charities and organisations across Scotland. There will be a person in our own constituencies who, at this very moment, is worried about a lump or a change in their breast. They will be awash with anxiety, but they will be reluctant to take that all-important step and make an appointment with the doctor. It's for that person that I welcome tonight's debate. I understand that sense of trepidation, as I'm sure we all do, but it is always better to know the truth than to live in fear and doubt, especially where one's health is concerned. It's also for that person and for the many other people around the UK who every day are affected by breast cancer that I welcome Breakthrough Breast Cancer's Touch, Look and Check campaign. Like many others, I had the opportunity to attend a session with Breakthrough team that recently visited the Parliament. I learned more about self-checking, particularly its importance in relation to early diagnosis or simply as a means of alleviating doubt. The team do a fantastic job, and I hope the crucial message they promote is beginning to reap rewards. I was especially attentive to what they said about self-checking, especially as I thought I had all the information I needed. Since I was a teenage girl, I've been trained in what to look for, and I've been carrying out regular checks on myself. In fact, only last Christmas, my sister and I received a self-examination glove and information DVD from our mum. Now, that wasn't the gift I had asked for, and you can imagine the look on my face when I opened the somewhat curious gift. But I can honestly say it's the most important gift I've ever received. My mum was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 33. At that time, I was only 10. I didn't realise how life-changing that diagnosis would be. I didn't understand the magnitude of a double mastectomy, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, or reconstructive surgery. What I did understand was that this was a frightening experience which caused a lot of physical and emotional pain, not only to my mum, but to the rest of our family. A pain that reduces over time, but never goes away. It's because of this that I believe we need to offer more counselling to families, and in particular children, during this traumatic time. I know that counselling services have moved on in the last 18 years, but there's always room for improvement. I also believe we should make a concerted effort to increase awareness of male breast cancer. I know that the incidence of breast cancer is far lower amongst men, with around 300 diagnosed per year in the UK and around 25 in Scotland. However, what that figure does not mention, whatever the figure, more attention has to be paid to the men who are potentially at risk. I've already alluded to my mum's case, and I'm sure many, as we've heard, many other members have similar experiences. But what I did not say was that her father, my grandfather, was also diagnosed with breast cancer and indeed died from it. So believe me when I say we need to do more to increase awareness. I'm talking for better experience. My mother's cancer is genetic, and whilst I realise that this is also rare, I know that my family is not alone. That is the message that we should be broadcasting to all those affected by breast cancer. You are not alone. Help is always at end All you have to do is ask. This is the message of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and that is why we must all keep supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Nanette Millen to be followed by Mary Fee.
Deputy Presiding Officer, I'm pleased to speak in this debate at the start of Breast Cancer Awareness Month and congratulate Linda Fabiani on her motion highlighting the importance of early diagnosis of breast cancer. I'd also like to endorse Jackie Bailey's recently lodged motion on the same subject, because I think it's important that we all unite in support of Breakthrough Breast Cancer and other cancer charities which are working to get home to women the importance of looking out for any physical changes which might indicate cancer at an early stage, when it's likely to be easily and successfully treated. And we've heard of many personal successes this evening. It's important too, I think, to acknowledge the Government's Detect Cancer Early initiative, which has rightly, I think, selected breast cancer as the first cancer type to be targeted. Given that it affects 1 in 8 of the female population, I've no doubt that we've all been in contact with someone who's developed breast cancer. My own first close contact with the condition was over 30 years ago, when I and 3 close friends from my medical school class all developed breast lumps. Mine was a cyst, and I still remember the palpable relief all round when the surgeon's probe found fluid rather than solid tissue. One of my friends had a benign fibroadenoma, the other 2 had cancer. Sadly, one of these died fairly soon after diagnosis from liver secondaries. And if anyone's noticed the well-worn and very shabby purse I always carry with me and won't replace, it's because it was a 21st birthday present from this particular friend. The 4th member of our group lived with her cancer for around 15 years until she eventually succumbed to very slow-growing lung secondaries. So I've been very much aware of breast cancer for many years. I'd never miss a screening appointment, and I intend to submit to regular mammography after the age when screening is routinely on offer. I was interested to hear Linda Fabiani mention older women, because the need to be aware of breast cancer into old age was brought home to me recently when a friend who's also a constituent contacted me to ask for breast cancer statistics in women aged over 70. Because while she was in hospital herself for a lumpectomy, she'd met 2 other patients in the same ward whose cancer had been diagnosed in their 70s. It set me thinking about how many women, having reached the age when routine screening stops, might assume that their risk of developing breast cancer has fallen, when in fact there's an increasing risk with age, and with an ageing population, an increasing number of women will therefore be at risk. I know that Breakthrough Breast Cancer and other organisations do point out that the risk continues, but I do wonder if more emphasis should be put on this, a point that I raised with the Cabinet Secretary during health questions last week. But clearly the importance of early diagnosis applies to all age groups, and I hope that the publicity of Breast Cancer Awareness Month will remind all women of the importance not only of regular screening, but also of regular self-examination, and encourage them to pay attention to the touch, look and check message being promoted by Breakthrough Breast Cancer. Presiding Officer, many people nowadays survive a diagnosis of breast cancer for many years, but many more could do so if that diagnosis was made early. So congratulations to Linda Fabiani for doing her bit in Parliament to highlight the need to be aware of breast cancer, and all credit to those outside who work year in, year out to educate the general public on the importance of regular vigilance and self-examination so that the condition can be diagnosed and treated as early as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now call Mary Fee to be followed by Malcolm Chisholm.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I also add my thanks to Linda Fabiani on securing today's debate? Last week, I was one of thousands of people to join in with the world's biggest coffee morning in aid of Macmillan Cancer Support. And I was delighted that the people of Erskine who attended helped to raise over £160. So a big thank you to everyone who came along on Friday. Today's debate is one which is very sensitive, as breast cancer affects almost every family across Scotland and further afield. And speaking as someone who has personally benefited from genetic testing because of the very high incidence of a genetic breast cancer in my family, I know only too well how crucial the research and advances in detection and treatment of cancer is. This month sees many charities and organisations helping to raise awareness of breast cancer, from Macmillan Cancer Support and Breakthrough Breast Cancer in Scotland to the White House and the NFL in the States. And it's right that we have the chance to debate how we raise awareness in this chamber. Last month, the Scottish Government launched a new advert fronted by Elaine C. Smith, which has been mentioned by others in this debate. And some people referred to the advert as shocking. I would have preferred that the likes of the BBC used adjectives such as vital, necessary or crucial to encourage women to look for early signs, not scare them when having suspected breast cancer can already be a very frightening experience. Presiding Officer, I'd like to focus today on tackling inequalities in screening. In Greater Glasgow and Clyde, it was found that women with learning difficulties were less likely to take up screening than in other NHS regions. These women are more likely to wait longer before seeing a doctor or less likely to attend screening at all. There needs to be more effort to encourage women with learning difficulties to have regular screenings, and how we target this group of vulnerable women is a serious issue that this Parliament must address, not only for breast cancer screening, but for all cancers. And recently, the Equal Opportunities Committee launched their report into Gypsy Traveller communities accessing healthcare, and this includes accessing screening for Gypsy Traveller women. Another report suggested that the best way to educate younger generations of Gypsy Traveller women is to go through the matriarch, normally the grandmother in the family. However, I look forward to working with the committee further and the new Health Secretary on improving access to healthcare for Gypsy Traveller women, especially in early detection of cancers that can save the lives of many. Finally, Presiding Officer, there appears to be a decline in the number of women accessing screening when you start at the least deprived areas and move to the most deprived areas. For example, women with learning difficulties, there's a lower uptake for the women from the poorest areas across society. And while it is good practice for mobile breast screening units to be parked near community centres and libraries, we must remember these community facilities are often the first to be closed due to budget cuts, and especially in poor areas, meaning that poor women will continue to have the lowest uptake of breast cancer screening. And in closing, Presiding Officer, can I commend the work of Breakthrough Breast Cancer and their excellent Touch, Look, Check campaign. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now call Malcolm Chisholm.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. I would like to begin by congratulating Linda Fabiani on bringing forward this very important debate today. I think we can celebrate the improvements there have been in breast cancer survival. 20 years ago, the number of women who survived beyond 5 years from diagnosis was just over 60%, whereas 20 years later it is upwards of 80%. But in celebrating, of course, we still have to remember that over 1,000 women a year die from breast cancer. And we also sadly have to remember that 5-year survival is not always the end of the matter. Nanette Milne reminded us of slow-growing secondaries that sometimes arise. And of course, there can also be with breast cancer a recurrence of the primary tumour. As I was reminded at the Moonwalk reception last night, when a marvellous woman from Glasgow, still young in fact, told me how the breast cancer that had been treated a little while ago had sadly recurred. The other problem I think we have in Scotland is that still more people die within 1 year of diagnosis than in other countries, and that obviously is related to late presentation. And that is why the government's Detect Cancer Early initiative is so important. Like other speakers, I welcome the recent advertising campaign round that, and also pay tribute to the work of Breakthrough Breast Cancer through their TLC campaign. In fact, Breakthrough should be commended for a whole range of work that they've done over the last few years, and I think of the service pledge that they've pioneered, their campaign on lymphedema, and I was pleased to introduce a debate about that 2 years ago, and also, of course, the great work they do in the field of research. And I would certainly like to acknowledge the great Breakthrough Breast Cancer Research Centre at the Western General Hospital. And in mentioning, of course, the Western General, I should also pay tribute to the amazing breast unit there, because, in fact, the main reason that we have much better survival, 5-year survival, than we had 20 years ago is because of the improved treatments and services that we have at units such as the Western General Hospital in Edinburgh and the Beats in Glasgow, which Aileen MacLeod mentioned. In referring to Breakthrough Breast Cancer, however, I think it would be wrong to forget the other charities who work in this area and who are also referred to in general terms in the motion. Breast Cancer Care provide invaluable services and 3 years ago developed standards for secondary breast cancer, which were certainly widely praised at the time. If the Minister has any information about that, it would be interesting to know to what extent those standards have been taken up. I should also mention Challenge Breast Cancer Scotland, who also had a meeting in Parliament last Tuesday. There were in fact 3 of these receptions within 1 week in the Parliament, and I suppose I have a particular attachment, in a sense, to that campaign because it used to be called the Scottish Breast Cancer Campaign. It started in 1994, and I remember introducing a debate in the House of Commons a few months after they started, one of the purposes of which was to praise their campaign and the enormous lobby of Downing Street they had in 1994, demanding more research and better services. And I think we can say that there has been great progress in both of those areas since. I think also, though, I should refer to the meeting that they had last week, because there was a talk by a GP from Glasgow who actually sent out a very negative message about screening, and I think the majority of people in the breast cancer field wouldn't have been in agreement with what she said. But having said that, I would support the demand of Challenge Breast Cancer Scotland for informed choice around screening decisions by women. So I think we can all agree with that. But I do think positive messages have to be sent out about screening as well as checking and general awareness. Remembering that 1,000 women a year die from breast cancer, nobody can rest, either the health service or the government or the charities, until that number has been drastically reduced.
Thank you. I now call on the Minister to respond to the debate. Michael Matheson, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I begin by congratulating Linda Fabiani in securing time for this particular debate, and to thank her for bringing forward what is a debate on a very important issue that affects so many women in Scotland today and has done over many years. Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I think, is a very important opportunity for us to reflect on what has happened over years and the whole campaign to get more effective treatment and support for those who may be diagnosed with breast cancer, but also to make sure that we look about the future and the future opportunities that also arise as a result of the advances that take place in medical science. But alongside that, to keep focus on what is a cancer that, again, continues to affect so many people within Scotland. And I want to pay particular thanks to the range of charities that do a tremendous amount of work in this particular field in helping to raise awareness amongst women and the public in general, but also the bit that can often be forgotten, helping to support women and their families during the course of treatment that may follow from such a diagnosis, which cannot be underestimated. Because for being diagnosed with cancer, for most of us, is probably the worst scenario that you can imagine, much of which is informed by past experience of seeing a friend or a loved one who has had the disease. I'm not sure if it's a fear that we'll ever be able to eradicate in general, but I think it is worth keeping in mind that the outcomes from a cancer diagnosis today are, for many cancers, radically different from what they were 20 or 30 years ago. And a number of members in the course of the debate have mentioned how breast cancer has touched their lives, whether it's resulted in the loss of a friend, but also I think it's worth reflecting the fact that many of us who may not have lost a friend through breast cancer are likely to know someone who has survived breast cancer, because there are an increasing number of women who do survive from the illness. And a large part of that has been because of the good progress that's been made over the last 2 years around treatment. Alongside that, with the screening for breast cancer, that's also allowed us to help to ensure that women are diagnosed earlier, which allows earlier treatment, and very often for that diagnosis to take place at a stage when less aggressive treatment may be required. And it is worth noting that around 9 out of 10 women diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer now survive beyond 5 years, which is good news. However, we also have to recognise that Scotland continues to lag behind other European countries for cancer survival rates. And along with an ageing population, we also expect the incidence of cancer to increase. So there's clearly much more we have to do in this area. We know that breast cancer is common, with 1 in 9 Scottish women being diagnosed in the course of their lifetime. And by detecting cancer earlier, we can treat people while very often they are in better health and where less aggressive treatment may be necessary. But if we're to continue to turn the tables on our fight against cancer, we need to get better at detecting it much earlier. And a number of members have made reference to the Detect Cancer Early programme, which is exactly about achieving that. Changing people's mindsets about cancer and the potential signs that they may have cancer. Not only for individuals themselves, but also for our clinicians and other healthcare support staff to be much more vigilant. Within the Detect Cancer Early programme, we have a social marketing strategy, a big part of which is also about involving health professionals and having a greater understanding as well. And we've also begun a new programme of work with Healthcare Improvement Scotland to review the Scottish referral guidelines for suspected cancer for breast, colorectal and for lung cancer to see whether they can be improved yet further. And we're also looking at some of the capacity issues which are likely to arise both in screening and also in diagnostic services as a result of the changing demographic situation we have here in Scotland. For breast cancer specifically, we've recently launched the Breast Cancer Social Marketing Campaign, and many of us as MSPs, at least on an annual basis, are involved in an element of social marketing ourselves when we don those pink hats, pink rosettes, pink, whatever it may be you choose to put on, but it's all part of that social marketing campaign, working with third sector organisations to raise awareness. But Jackie Bailey raised an important point, I think, around some of the research does show that women are not necessarily aware of the common signs of breast cancer as they should be, and that they're also not aware of the changing nature of survival rates and also the variety of changes that can take place within the breast itself. And that's why we brought forward the breast cancer campaign. I think it would be fair to say that it's generated a considerable amount of interest and discussion, which in my view is good, because that's exactly what it was meant to do. It was meant to make sure that we encourage people to talk about these things in a much more open fashion. As Audrey Butt says, they'll just have to get over it and start to discuss these things much more openly, because that is a healthy way in which to address this health challenge. Several members have also made reference to the screening programme, and we're putting further investment into the screening programme over the next 3 years in order to upgrade the system to a digital system which is much more effective as well. Presiding Officer, I'm very conscious that this is an area where we need to make more progress, particularly for those women who are in more deprived communities who may not take up the opportunity of screening. I think Mary Fee's point around learning disabilities and the health inequalities that exist there for individuals with a learning disability is an area where there is clearly more ground for us to look at covering. I will give the Chamber my commitment that we will look at where there are further measures that we can undertake to help to encourage more women from more deprived communities to take up the opportunity of screening, and to do so in a way that also recognises that some of those who may require support, if they have a learning disability, that we make the system as accessible to them as possible, and to make sure that we encourage them to make use of screening in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And that concludes Linda Fabiani's Members' Business. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I now close this meeting of Parliament.